Hi, I'm Danny with Tax 29 Tax Service.
And I'm Andy. You know, Danny, the prices of everything keeps going up and up.
Inflation.
Well, at Tax 29, we said enough. We're keeping our pricing structure the same this year as what we had last tax season.
So whether you file in one of our local offices or whether you file with us online at tax29.com, you'll get the same professional tax prep at affordable pricing along with year-round service.
For a list of our pricing or to find out more, stop by one of our local offices or visit us at tax29.com.
What's the real story? How did all of this come to be? Was it all by chance, or did something or someone design everything? Join us as we learn from our host, William Henry, and discover that the story of the Earth and our universe is really his story.
Welcome to Discovering His Story, a production of Youngstown Christian Television. This program is dedicated to looking at the biblical record in comparison with the historical record and seeing where the two intersect, and thereby bolster our understanding of what the Bible says about many historical events, giving us great confidence in its accuracy, as well as giving us good background information for what we see in the biblical record. Now, the last time we were looking in this era of ancient times at the Neo-Assyrian Empire, and we had come to the place where King Hezekiah of Judah is in Jerusalem, and he is about to face the onslaught of the Assyrians as they're going to come to Jerusalem. And he knows what they have done to other cities in the past. So what is he to do? Well, this occurs in 688 BC, and Hezekiah, knowing what is coming, begins to prepare. He strengthened the fortifications of the city. We see that in Isaiah 22, verses 8 to 11, and that he fortified and provisioned the central cities of Judah. So he not only took care of Jerusalem, but other cities outside of Jerusalem. We see that in 2 Chronicles 4. He repaired and strengthened the walls, 2 Chronicles 32. And there's some places where he actually pulled down houses in order to complete, as archaeologists have uncovered, a massive 130-foot stretch of wall, partly built directly onto bedrock and partly on top of houses only recently constructed. And we see that also in Isaiah 22, verse 10. So he solidified the walls. Now, what's one of the major problems any city has in enduring a siege? Well, it's having water. And so Hezekiah undertook his most famous work, and that is to build a water conduit in Jerusalem. Here you see the borders of Jerusalem, the different gates that are there, where the wall was built up, and where the water gate is, towards the bottom there, takes us to the spring of Gihon, and there's a water conduit that runs from there up into the city to the pool of Siloam. But it's a rather narrow conduit. It's the one that David sent his soldiers up into the city in order to conquer it when it was held by the inhabitants before David took over and made it his capital. And also was something that could have been discovered by the Assyrians. And so Hezekiah decides we need to have a better system to get water from the spring of Gihon into the city. We find this account in 2 Kings 20 and also 2 Chronicles 32. This, of course, was necessary to prevent enemy forces from gaining access to the city's external spring at Gihon, from which there was that internal tunnel. So their task was to reverse the direction of the Gihon spring. Instead of this gushing out into a special pool in the Kidron Valley where Sennacherib's troops could take advantage of it, see, Hezekiah has twofold purpose here. Not only to make sure water's coming into the city, but to deny water to the Assyrians. And so Sennacherib's troops would take advantage of any pool of water there, but instead Hezekiah wants the water to flow in the opposite direction, emerging inside Jerusalem's walls, thereby creating the Siloam pool. This tunnel, you can see, is dug underneath the bedrock of the city. The arrows there point to the tunnel that Hezekiah's men built, and also where the pool of Siloam would be inside the city. This new tunnel was dug through 1,750 feet of solid limestone. Now, they don't have jackhammers back then. They're digging by hand with tools, but still solid limestone, and just big enough to dig through. They're not going to make a huge tunnel that people could walk through. So it's very hard work and in the dark, except for the lamps that they're able to take in there. Here is a side picture then of the wall of Jerusalem where the Jebusite water tunnel had been. And they were able to go down there to get water from the spring, the one that David knew about. And then Hezekiah's tunnel going from the spring to the pool of Siloam. In 1880, this is a modern picture of the tunnel of Hezekiah that you can walk into today. I've not been there myself. I understand that sometimes it does have water in it, maybe all the time, I don't know, so you might get wet walking through there as part of the tunnel. In 1880, some boys swimming in the Siloam pool discovered an old inscription etched on the walls of the feeder tunnel. The text read as follows. This was the account of the breakthrough. While the laborers were still working with their picks, each toward the other, and while there were still 3 cubits to be broken through, the voice of each was heard calling to the other, because there was possibly the word a split in the rock to the south and to the north. Now what they're talking about there is the fact that Hezekiah had the workers starting from each end. So they were starting from the extremes and working toward the middle with the hopes that they would connect. Now remember, they're going through solid limestone. I'm not sure how you would measure that, how you could tell where you were. But it says that at the moment of breakthrough, the laborers struck each toward the other, pick against pick. So they could hear a voice, they were close enough, and so they began to dig toward one another. And at that point then the water flowed from the spring to the pool for 120 cubits. And the height of the rock above the heads of the laborers was 100 cubits. They also plugged the old crevice that David used with large quantities of rock so that the Assyrians could not get through. So it's remarkable that these workers are working from opposite ends of this large tunnel and get close enough within a few feet that they're able to connect with one another and the water is able to flow. This is a picture of an item that has been found. This is the royal seal of King Hezekiah. You can see the Hebrew writing on that, and the picture that's on there as well. Okay, so this is deemed to be from Hezekiah. All right, in 701, Judah was invaded by Sennacherib. He also invaded Phoenicia, the cities of Tyre and Sidon, Philistia, the cities of Ascalon and Ekron, and the cities of Judah. As he went through all these areas, Sennacherib was successful at capturing them. There were 46 strong cities from which over 200,000 people were deported. We find that in 2 Kings chapters 18 and 19. Sennacherib's armies reached right up to the walls of Jerusalem. Hezekiah gave in. He expanded the borders of Judah at the expense of kingdoms which had refused to join the revolt, mainly in the direction of Gaza and Edom. Sennacherib in 689 entered and destroyed Babylon after uprisings there. He felt a cultural inferiority to Babylon, but destroyed it anyway. Sennacherib described the opening battle. Following the temporary, at least, capitulation of Hezekiah, Sennacherib moved on down to Egypt. As we've seen, he already destroyed Babylon after uprisings there, and so he moves down to Egypt. There he encounters Tirhakah, who is of the Ethiopian dynasty that had taken over Egypt, so no longer being ruled by native Egyptians. And Sennacherib forced Tirhakah to flee. Assyria, at this point now, is ruling over Egypt as dynasty number 26, until a little bit later when Egypt is liberated by Psamtik I. Well, King Hezekiah of Judah was relying on Tirhakah, the Pharaoh of Egypt, for help against Assyria. We find that in 2 Kings 19. Tirhakah, the king of Ethiopia, or Cush, or Nubia, as we said, had taken over Egypt. And so Hezekiah's reliance upon Egypt now is proving to be ill-advised. Sennacherib then sent a strong force led by the aforementioned Tartar and two other top commanders, Rab Saris and Rab Shakeh. The prefix Rab is the Hebrew word for chief. And we find that in 2 Kings 18:17. And these are authentic titles confirmed from cuneiform texts. The soldiers of Sennacherib mocked Hezekiah and his faith in Yahweh to deliver him. This is a painting that was done to illustrate the siege of Jerusalem by Assyria. And if we can move close up to the bottom part underneath the ramp there, we can see what the Assyrians are doing to people that they capture. Okay, now focus in a little closer if we can. And down. And you might be able to see some poles there. It might be a little hard still, but there are poles that are being erected, especially over on the left-hand side. You can see a couple poles, and there are people on those poles. That's called impaling. And the Assyrians perfected the art of impaling, where they would take living human beings and put their body on a pole, stick the pole right up through them. Very painful, excruciating way to die. This is kind of the precursor to crucifixion, which was perfected subsequently by the Persians and then the Romans in order to prolong the agony of death even more. If you look through the picture, you can see all kinds of mayhem and people being killed. Over on the right, you see people leaving the city as well. Sennacherib sent a letter to Hezekiah advising him of the foolishness of expecting help from Egypt or from his God. Oh, I should mention too, I forgot, that the soldiers that mocked Hezekiah spoke in Hebrew. The emissaries that went out to meet with them didn't want them to speak in Hebrew because they didn't want the people of the city to hear what was being said. But the Assyrians intelligently said, no, we want everybody here. Well, hear what we're going to do to you. And that your God can't do any better than any of the other gods we have faced. All right, so Sennacherib sent a letter to Hezekiah saying it's foolish to expect help from Egypt or from his God. What did Hezekiah do? He spread the letter before the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies. Now here's an instance where, a king does something he's not supposed to do in going into the Holy of Holies, and God does not strike him, I suppose because of his attitude and his purpose. He is coming to Yahweh for help. And he spread the letter before the Ark of the Covenant and begged for Yahweh's salvation from this pagan ruler. Isaiah then brings him the response in 2 Kings chapter 19. But notice what it says here in the passage. Therefore, thus says the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, he will not come to this city or shoot an arrow there, and he will not come before it with a shield or throw up a siege ramp against it. By the way that he came, by the same he will return, and he shall not come to this city, declares the Lord, or declares Yahweh. So Sennacherib had not yet arrived. His soldiers, Tartar and the others, are there to engage the siege. And Isaiah tells Hezekiah, look, he's not even going to get here. Well, what happened? Did Yahweh come through? Well, that night, a plague struck the army, the Assyrian army, and they went home. There's a painting done by Rubens of the army being plagued. And Rubens shows the source of the plague as being the host of angels that God sent. The story Herodotus, that Greek historian, deals with this, and he tells about it in Book 2. And very interesting what he has to say. He points out, one night a multitude of field mice swarmed over the Assyrian camp and devoured their quivers and their bows and the handles of their shields likewise, insomuch that they fled the next day unarmed, and many fell. So it's quite possible that God, through his angels, sent these mice in, and not only did they chew on their implements of war, but may have also brought a plague into the camp, which seems to be what is mentioned in the biblical narration in 2 Chronicles 32. Here's a poem that I thought was very interesting, written by Lord Byron, that famous English poet, called The Destruction of Sennacherib. And I think he captures very well what occurred. He says, "For the angel of death spread his wings on the blast, and breathed in the face of the foe as he passed. And the eyes of the sleepers waxed deadly and chill, and their hearts but once heaved, and forever grew still. And the widows of Ashur," remember Ashur is the god, but also the city from which the Assyrians come, "are loud in their wail, and the idols are broke in the temple of Baal. And the might of the Gentile, unsmote by the sword," Hezekiah didn't have to send out his army, but what? "Hath melted like snow in the glance of the Lord." Well, what a great poem to describe this deliverance of Hezekiah and the nation of Judah, the city of Jerusalem, from the Assyrian horde. Sennacherib boasted about the 46 Judahite cities the Assyrians had stormed and captured, and about the 200,000 Judahites who had been carried away as slaves. But the only thing he could say about Hezekiah was, "I locked him up like a caged bird in the midst of Jerusalem, his royal city." This was as close to failure as any Eastern ruler would get. You don't find ancient rulers talking about their defeats. So that's all he had to say about Hezekiah. Well, in 681, there was a rebellion. Sennacherib, returning to his homeland, was assassinated by one or two of his sons in the temple of the god Ninurta at Kalak. This god, along with the god Marduk, apparently felt that they had been badly treated by Sennacherib. At least that's what people thought to explain his death. The event was widely regarded as punishment of divine origin. A more practical motive can be found in Sennacherib's decisions regarding his succession. His oldest son and proclaimed heir was likely killed as a part of the Babylonian rebellion in 694 BC. For a brief time, the next oldest son was named heir, but then Sennacherib changed his mind, announcing a younger son, Esarhaddon, as the next king. With this son not being present in the capital, his other brothers decided to initiate a coup, killing their father. Esarhaddon quickly gathered support in the midst of the chaos surrounding the assassination of Sennacherib and entered Nineveh on March 12, 680 BC, as the unquestioned ruler of the Assyrian Empire. However, much damage had been done to the empire. A few years later, when things got more under control, a man by the name of Ashurbanipal became the ruler. This is the time of Manasseh and Josiah. In 669, Manasseh of Judah joined Ashurbanipal against Egypt. Manasseh was a wicked king who undid all the good that his father had done spiritually, his father Hezekiah, as you can see on the chart here. This is in 2 Kings 21, and joined Ashur against Egypt. Necho was the ruler of Egypt, and he is the only one of the rebel leaders that was spared. Manasseh may have eliminated all of the prophets of Yahweh, for there appeared to be none around. He built pagan altars in the two outer courts of the temple and erected an image of Astarte in the Holy of Holies. He put this pagan goddess statue in the Holy of Holies. Probably the first time that any Judahite king had used the temple for worshiping any other god but Yahweh in the temple. Interestingly, from this time onward, there is no mention of the Ark of the Covenant. So it appears that something had happened to it by this point in time. And you can conjecture back as to what may have happened to it and when. Well, King Manasseh of Judah is captured by Assyria and taken to Assyria in captivity. He is kept in terrible conditions. He became sick, and during a time when he was sick, he humbled himself to God, prayed and begged with God. If anyone that we could look at did not deserve forgiveness by God, it was Manasseh. But God heard him. Manasseh was forgiven, was released by the Assyrians, taken back to Jerusalem and to his kingdom. Finally, Manasseh knew that Yahweh was God. When he got back, he took away all the idols and the altars that he had built, and he repaired the altar of the Lord. He offered peace and thank offerings to God. He commanded the people of Judah to worship the God of Israel. But, as might be expected, some of the people still worshiped idols in the high places. Then we move back to Assyria. In 663, Thebes in Egypt was destroyed by as Ashurbanipal conquered the capital of Upper Egypt in the greatest triumph in Assyrian history. It had been regarded as impregnable with its 100 gates. The Assyrians plundered the city and its temples, completely carrying off enormous spoils of priceless worth. As Ashurbanipal put it, back to Assyria. This is going to come into play later. So Ashurbanipal takes a lot of treasures of Egypt back to Assyria. This was a blow from which Thebes never recovered. The pictures I'm showing are different engravings of the Assyrians. At the same time, in Rome, the Roman Senate was increased to 200 members. Now, back in Judah. Josiah becomes the next king of Judah at the age of 8. His reign was the last period of greatness in the history of Judah. He began his reign as a boy of 8 and ruled for 31 years. He took advantage of Assyria's decline at this point and worked to renew the kingdom of the house of David in all of the Levant. Political and national restoration was encouraged through extensive religious reformation, as Josiah was a young man who followed Yahweh. As a part of that, he oversaw the repair and cleansing of the temple. During that procedure, the copy of the Torah, the law, was found and read, and that resulted in reformation. That resulted in the closing down of the Canaanite-style religion, which contained child sacrifice. That resulted in obedience, which was demonstrated by celebration of Passover. Now, some might wonder, what was this Torah scroll that was read? Well, the Torah simply refers to the Pentateuch, or the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and it certainly was at least that. It may have either contained the book of Deuteronomy, or maybe it was the book of Deuteronomy, which outlines the law of God. But at any rate, the reading of it caused revival throughout the land. It may be that the secretary who brought the Torah to Josiah was a man by the name of Gemariah. This is his seal. For some reason not. There we go. He was the son of Shaphan the scribe, one of the princes, from whose chamber Baruch read Jeremiah's prophecies to the people. He with others sought to keep Jehoiakim later from burning the scroll. We'll come to that. That's in Jeremiah 36. Here's another artifact. This is the seal of Azariah, the son of Hilkiah, it's called a bulla, which means a seal. One of the most important discoveries in the history of biblical archaeology, since he is the son of the high priest Hilkiah, who was there when the Torah was found at the time of Josiah. Now we'll have to come back next time and find out, what does Josiah do? This revival's going on. The high priest is involved. The Torah has been found, the book of the law. Idols have been destroyed. But what's going to happen next with Josiah and the kingdom of Judah? Next time on Discovering His Story.
What's the real story? How did all of this come to be? Was it all by chance, or did something or someone design everything? Join us as we learn from our host, William Henry, and discover that the story of the earth and our universe is really his story.